My girlfriend invited us to her family dinner. My son thought he didn't see her daughter slip something into his jacket pocket. I checked it and froze, then quietly slipped it into the daughter's bag instead. 30 minutes later, the police showed up. I noticed something was wrong before we even sat down. It was one of those polished family dinners where everything looked expensive and tense at the same time. Candles in glass holders. Linen napkins folded like little fans. A roast in the middle of the table nobody was allowed to touch until Sandra said so. My girlfriend Lydia kept smoothing her dress over her knees like she was trying to flatten the whole night into something normal. My son, Eli, sat beside me in the jacket I made him wear because the house was cold and because I wanted him to look neat. He was 10, quiet, careful, the kind of kid who said thank you without being reminded and noticed when someone was left out. Lydia's daughter, Kira, was across from him. She was 13 and old enough to know exactly what she was doing. I saw her get up during dessert, not in some dramatic way, just casual, bare feet on hardwood, a bored face. She circled behind Eli while Sandra complained that the whipped cream was too soft. Eli was watching Lydia's brother cut the pie. Nobody else was looking. Kira leaned down like she was reaching for the napkin that had slipped from his lap. Her hand went into his jacket pocket, then back out. Fast. Too fast. Eli half turned, like he felt the movement, but Kira was already straightening up, tucking hair behind her ear, walking back to her chair with that blank, practiced face some kids get when adults never call them out. My stomach dropped so hard it made me feel cold. I waited 10 seconds. Then I put my hand on Eli's shoulder and said, "Come help me grab your inhaler from the hallway, bud." He blinked at me. "I'm okay. Still. Come with me." He stood, confused, and followed me out. The hallway was quiet, except for dishes clinking in the dining room. I crouched in front of him and slipped my hand into his jacket pocket. My fingers closed around something small and hard. I pulled it out and froze. It was Sandra's ring. Not just any ring, her diamond cluster ring, the one she'd shown off twice already that evening. Old family piece. Insurance papers. "Someday, this goes to Kira," she'd said while laughing like that was cute and not a warning label on the whole night. For a second, all I could hear was blood in my ears. Eli looked at my face and went pale. "Dad?" I should have spoken right away, but I couldn't, because it wasn't just a ring in my hand. It was a whole answer. Why Sandra kept asking Eli where he went to school with that little smile. Why Lydia's sister had asked if he'd ever had behavior issues. Why Kira had been watching him all night like she was waiting for a cue. I looked down at the ring, then at the dining room, then at Eli. He whispered, "I didn't take anything." "I know." I said it fast, firm, no hesitation. His eyes filled anyway. I closed my hand around the ring. I had one sharp, ugly thought. If I marched in there waving it around, they would still make this about my son, about confusion, about misunderstanding, about how boys are impulsive, about how maybe Kira had only found it and gotten scared. No, I wasn't doing that. I took Eli's inhaler out of my bag, so it looked like that had been the reason we stepped away. Then I walked him back to the table. My hands were steady by then. Too steady. Kira had left her purse hanging off the back of her chair, open at the top. When Sandra stood up to get coffee, and half the table looked away, I passed behind Kira, bent like I was picking up a dropped fork, and slipped the ring into the side pocket of her bag. Then I sat down. I don't know if that was the cleanest thing I've ever done. It wasn't, but I knew what I had seen. And I wasn't going to let my son wear what she had prepared for him. 30 minutes later, the police showed up. By then, Sandra had already done the performance. First, she touched her hand and frowned. Then she checked the bathroom. Then she made everyone stay seated. Then she said, "Nobody leave. My ring is missing." The whole room changed shape after that. Chairs stopped squeaking. Lydia went stiff beside me. Her brother cursed under his breath. Sandra pressed one hand to her chest like she was in a movie and said the ring had been on her finger before dessert. I felt Eli go rigid next to me. I put my hand on his knee under the table. "It's okay," I said quietly. Sandra looked directly at him, not at the adults, not at the servers carrying plates back to the kitchen, not at Kira, who suddenly looked fascinated by her nails. At my son. I caught that look, and something old inside me finally got tired. I'm Noah. I was 38 then, living in Tacoma, working as a massage therapist in a physical therapy clinic 4 days a week, and seeing private clients on Saturdays when I needed to cover extra expenses. I'd been a single dad since Eli was 3. His mom lived in another state and drifted in and out with birthday calls and promises she rarely kept. For 6 years, it had been me and him in a 2-bedroom rental with a too small kitchen and a bookshelf we built from cinder blocks and stained boards. And for the last 14 months, Lydia had been in our life. At first, I thought she was a gift. She laughed easily. She said she liked how gentle Eli was. She brought soup when I got sick and folded my towels without asking. She worked part-time at a salon, talked a lot about wanting more stability, and seemed tired in a way I understood. Divorced. 1 daughter. Too many bills. Too much family in her business. I thought we were building something. What I didn't understand at first was that with Lydia came all of them. Sandra, with her hard smiles and comments disguised as concern. Lydia's brother, Mark, who always had some short-term problem that needed cash. Sandra's husband, Don, who pretended not to notice anything unless money was involved. And Kira, who had learned very young that her mother's family would bend around her as long as she looked injured enough. I was useful to them before I was ever welcome. It started small. Could I cover takeout one night because Sandra forgot her wallet? Could I spot Lydia's phone bill because her ex was late again? Could I put the cabin deposit on my card for a family weekend because it would be easier and everyone would reimburse me? They didn't reimburse me. Then came bigger things. A $420 tire replacement for Lydia because she needed the car for work. $600 for Kira's dance fees because it would devastate her to miss the recital. $1,100 when Mark was between jobs and Sandra swore it was temporary. A recliner delivery for Don's bad back. 3 grocery runs in 1 month because Sandra's pension was tied up. I wasn't rich. Massage therapy paid my bills, but only because I budgeted like my life depended on it. I tracked every copay, every school fee, every grocery receipt. I said no to myself all the time. Still, I kept saying yes to them because Lydia would stand in my kitchen after Eli was asleep and say, "I hate asking," because Sandra would pat my arm and say, "You're such a provider," because I wanted peace, because I wanted this family to feel possible, and because every time I hesitated, something subtle happened to Eli. Kira got the bigger slice. Kira got the front seat. Eli got told, "Maybe next time." At Thanksgiving, Sandra handed out little velvet envelopes with movie gift cards to all the grandkids and the children at the table. Eli didn't get one. Sandra laughed and said, "Oh, honey, I thought Lydia said he was older than that and wouldn't want one. He was 10. Kira was 13. At Christmas shopping in December, Lydia told Eli maybe he should stay with me at the food court because girl stuff would bore him. I found out later they all went to a toy store, and Kira came back with 2 bags while Eli got a pretzel and a lecture about being patient. There were always explanations. Always some soft place to land the blame. I let too much slide because none of it was big enough by itself. That was my mistake. Back at the dinner table, Sandra was already on her phone. "I'm calling," she said. "This is theft." Lydia leaned toward her. "Mom, maybe it'll turn up." Sandra's mouth flattened. A ring doesn't just walk away. Her eyes went to Eli again. I said, "Then maybe start by checking everyone equally." Silence. Don shifted in his chair, but didn't say anything. Sandra gave me that chilly little smile she used when she wanted to remind me I was still an outsider in her house. "Of course," she said. "Everyone." But she kept staring at my son. Eli was trying to sit still. His ears were red. He had one hand curled in the hem of his shirt, the way he did when he was scared and trying not to show it. I knew then it wasn't just Kira being mean. This had shape, pattern, permission. The police arrived fast because Sandra had made it sound urgent. 2 officers at the door, polite but serious, 1 older man, 1 younger woman. They asked basic questions first. When was the ring last seen? Who had left the table? Had there been staff in and out? Was anyone willing to let them look around? Sandra said, far too quickly, "You may want to check the children, not kids. Children, like evidence bins." The younger officer glanced around the table. "We'll speak to everyone." I stood up. "You can speak to my son with me right here." Sandra sighed like I was making everything harder. Kira stared down at her plate. The officers asked Eli if he had seen the ring. He said no. Quiet, scared, honest. Then the younger officer asked if anyone had been near him in the hallway. Kira spoke before he could. "He was gone for a while," she said. I turned and looked at her. She shrugged. "I'm just saying." The officer nodded once, then asked if anyone minded a quick search of bags and coats in the common area, voluntary, just to rule things out. Sandra spread her hands. "Please." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Kira's bag was searched third. When the younger officer pulled out the ring, the room changed in one hard second. Not noisy, not dramatic. Just changed. Sandra made a sound like the air had been punched out of her. Don stood up so fast his chair tipped. Lydia said, "Kira," and Kira went white. There are moments when the truth doesn't need help. This was one of them. Kira started crying immediately. Not shocked crying, angry crying, cornered crying. She said she didn't know how it got there. She said maybe somebody put it there. She said none of this was fair. Sandra looked from Kira to Eli to me, trying to rebuild the story in real time. The younger officer asked for the bag again and checked the side pocket. She asked calm questions. Had Kira handled the ring earlier? Had anyone seen her near Sandra after dessert? Did she leave the table? Nobody spoke for a second. Then Lydia's cousin Jenna, who had barely talked all evening, said, "I saw Kira behind Eli's chair." Everybody looked at her. Jenna swallowed. I didn't think anything of it then. The older officer nodded and wrote it down. Kira started shouting that Jenna was lying. Sandra finally said, "She's just upset." That was the line. Not she wouldn't do that. Not "I'm sorry Eli was put through this." Just she's upset. Like my son wasn't sitting there shaking. The officers handled it as a family incident because the ring had been recovered and Sandra didn't want formal charges against her own granddaughter. Of course she didn't. They gave a warning. They separated Kira and Lydia for a private conversation in the den. They noted statements. They told Sandra that false accusations, especially toward a child, could become serious very quickly. I saw the shame land on Sandra's face for the first time that night. Not because of what almost happened to Eli, because uniformed strangers had witnessed it. I bent toward my son. "Get your coat." He nodded so fast it hurt to look at. Lydia came out of the den while he was zipping his jacket. Her face was blotchy. She kept saying, "Noah, please, please don't leave like this. Like this." I almost laughed. I said, "How else exactly should I leave after your daughter tried to frame my son for theft in front of your whole family?" She flinched. Sandra stepped in. Then, voice brittle, "Kira is going through a lot." I turned to her. "And Eli was supposed to pay for it?" Nobody answered. That would have been enough. It should have been enough. But walking Eli to the car, I realized the ring wasn't even the whole reason I was shaking. It was the total, the tab I had let run. 2 days earlier, I had authorized the final payment on a beach rental for Sandra's 70th birthday weekend in April. 3 nights, big house on the water, 6 bedrooms, the kind of place I would never book for myself. Lydia had cried when I reserved it because Sandra never did anything nice for herself. Mark was supposed to contribute later. Don, too. I knew they wouldn't. I put down $3,800 from my savings anyway. I had also been sending Lydia $250 every Friday for the previous 4 months. Groceries, school lunches, gas. Emergencies. I knew where my money went better than anyone. I also knew what story I had been telling myself. That I was helping Lydia get on her feet. That family took time. That if I kept steady, kind, useful, the rest would follow. Meanwhile, my son was being measured, tested, and finally almost branded a thief. On the drive home, Eli sat in the back and stared at the dark window. After 10 minutes, he asked, "Did they really think I did it?" Kids don't ask those questions, unless they already know the answer. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes," I said. At least some of them were willing to. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You believed me fast." That one almost broke me. Because I know you, I said. He nodded like he needed to hear it twice, then put his forehead against the glass. When we got home, I made him hot chocolate, though it was late. He sat at the counter in his socks, shoulders finally dropping a little, with the mug in both hands. I didn't pace. I didn't rant. I didn't call anybody. I opened my laptop. Lydia texted first. Please talk to me. Then, she didn't mean for police to come. Then, Mom is a mess. Nothing about Eli. Nothing real. I logged into the rental portal for the beach house. The balance was due in full in 6 days. My card was already attached. I clicked cancel. There was a penalty. I accepted it. Then I opened my banking app and ended Lydia's weekly transfer. Then I removed my card from the utility autopay on the account I had set up for her apartment 3 months earlier when things were tight. Then I took screenshots of every confirmation page and saved them into one folder. That was it. One clean move, no threats, no speech. I wasn't going to fund a family my son wasn't safe inside. The next morning started with 14 missed calls. Lydia, Sandra, Mark, Lydia again, unknown number, Don. I showered, packed Eli's lunch, walked him to school, and went to work. I spent the morning doing deep tissue on a construction foreman with a shoulder like concrete and thought, in a flat, practical way, that I was done being anybody's relief valve. At lunch, I finally checked my messages. Sandra's voicemail was first. Noah, this has been a terrible misunderstanding, and canceling the birthday house is cruel. Cruel. Mark's message was shorter. You really screwed everyone. Don's was just, call me back. We had plans. Lydia sent paragraphs. Kira was embarrassed. The police terrified her. Her mother was humiliated. How could I cancel the trip without discussing it? How could I cut off groceries over one bad night? One bad night. That phrase sat in me like a stone. I replied once. I won't fund a family that let my son be targeted in front of everyone. The transfers are over. The trip is canceled. Do not contact Eli. Then I put my phone face down and went back to work. That evening, Lydia was waiting outside my apartment. Not crying this time. Angry. You're punishing all of us, she said the second I stepped out of my car. Eli was still at my friend Nate's place upstairs, thankfully. I kept my voice even. No, I'm removing myself from being used. She laughed once, sharp and ugly. Used? After everything I shared with you? I looked at her for a long second, because there it was. Not apology, not grief over Eli. Just the collapse of supply. I paid your phone bill 6 times, I said. I covered your rent twice. I paid dance fees for a child who never once treated my son like family. I booked your mother a birthday weekend none of you could afford. And when your daughter tried to frame Eli, your first concern was your mother being upset. Her face changed, but only a little. Kira is still a child. So is my son. That landed not enough, but it landed. She folded her arms. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being expensive, and I'm done. She stared at me. I think she expected more noise. Anger she could answer. Something messy she could retell. I gave her nothing. You can pick up your things on Saturday, I said. I'll leave them with Nate. Then I went upstairs. The fallout dragged for 2 weeks. Sandra sent a card about forgiveness with no apology inside. Mark texted that he'd already requested time off for the beach weekend. Don left one voicemail telling me real men didn't abandon family. Lydia switched tactics every other day. Angry, soft, guilty, nostalgic, furious again. At one point she wrote, "You're letting one mistake erase a year." I typed back, "No. I'm finally letting a year explain a mistake." That was the last message I sent. Jenna, the cousin who had spoken up, reached out separately. So did Lydia's aunt, Denise. Both said some version of the same thing. This had been building for a while. Kira was jealous of the attention Eli got from Lydia when I was around. Sandra fed it by treating Eli like temporary company. Lydia kept smoothing it over because she didn't want conflict. My money helped everyone ignore what was obvious. None of that surprised me. The part that stayed with me was this. They all knew enough to whisper, but not enough to stop it. Eli adjusted faster than I did. Kids sometimes do when the bad thing finally gets named. He stopped asking when we'd see Lydia again after the first week. He stopped checking whether Kira had messaged him. One Sunday, he helped me make pancakes and asked if we could use the money from that beach house thing for a real trip, just us. I smiled for the first time in days. Yeah, I said, we can. In April, the weekend that was supposed to belong to Sandra, I rented a small cabin on the coast instead. Nothing fancy. One bedroom, one fold-out couch, a wooden deck that faced gray water and stubborn wind. Eli brought a sketchbook and his binoculars. We ate grilled cheese, walked the beach in hoodies, and watched gulls fight over fries near the pier. I paid for an extra hour at the little arcade and didn't think once about who owed me money. On the second night, Eli found a smooth black stone with a white stripe through the middle and put it on the windowsill above his bed. Looks like a boundary line, he said. I laughed. That's a very weird thing for a 10-year-old to say. He shrugged. You've been saying boundary a lot. Fair enough. When we got home, I placed that stone in a small dish by our front door with my keys. Not because I needed a symbol, because sometimes it helps to see what changed. Lydia tried one more time in May. An email this time. She said Kira had started therapy. She said maybe enough time had passed to have one honest conversation. I believed 2 of those things, but not the part that mattered. I wrote back with one sentence. I hope therapy helps, but we are not reopening contact. Then I blocked that address too. That summer, business got better. Not magically, just practically. I took on 2 more private recovery clients, stopped bleeding money into other people's temporary problems, and finally replaced the cracked sofa Eli and I had been joking about for years. We picked one together, dark blue, nothing precious. One Friday night, we ate takeout on it while watching a nature documentary, and Eli fell asleep with his head on my shoulder halfway through. No tension, no measuring, no waiting for somebody's mother to decide whether he counted. Just home. That was the part I hadn't understood before. Boundaries don't always feel powerful when you set them. Sometimes they feel expensive, lonely, late, but then the noise dies down. And what's left is the sound of your kid laughing in the next room because nobody is trying to make him smaller. That was worth every canceled payment, worth every angry voicemail, worth the version of me they no longer had access to. I didn't tell Eli everything. He didn't need the spreadsheet of what I'd spent or the full list of the times I paid to keep peace at the cost of his comfort. Children should not have to learn adult betrayal through itemized statements. But I did tell him one thing, months later when he asked why we never went back. I said, because love that needs your silence to keep working isn't safe love. He thought about that while tying his shoes. Then he nodded once and said, okay, that was enough. The older I got, the less I believed family was proved by invitations, holiday tables, or how convincingly people could smile over dessert. I believed it more by who protected the quiet kid when the room turned, who spoke first, who paid attention, who refused to let shame land on the wrong shoulders. That night at the dinner table, they expected my son to carry what one spoiled girl had slipped into his pocket. Instead, the truth went back where it belonged, and so did my money.